All righty. Welcome, everybody. It is Tuesday morning. I have Frank McGovern on as my guest today. Frank, appreciate you being on. We've actually never met in person. This is our first official, but I've obviously known of you for quite some time now. And so it's obviously a pleasure to finally kind of meet you in this virtual platform here. So thank you for being on. Frank is going to dive into about his wholesaling business, and also a hot topic of today is lead generation. Where are people finding these leads in these hot markets? So Frank, once again, thank you. If you just want to go ahead and just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in real estate.
Sure. Greatly appreciate you having me on, Ryan. Can't thank you enough. I started my name's Frank McGovern. I'm in the Philadelphia market, primarily wholesale, but I have done, a little bit of everything. I've built a few houses, fixed and flips, rentals, but wholesaling is, what I'm best at, I would say. I started my real estate journey back in 2010. At that time, I had no money, no experience, no connections, no anything. I just literally had the desire and belief to change my life and do something different. I bought 100 bandit signs in January of 2010 and have not looked back since. I went from being, a one-man show, a solopreneur for the first couple of years, kind of figuring it out, to scaling and growing a pretty big team, to now kind of transitioning more into, commercial real estate and just focusing, on having a lean and mean team as opposed to, a huge team.
Awesome. I love it. It's funny you said, I said those exact same words at my other meeting. A lot of people want to grow, like, you hear they have 20 team members and all this. To me, I want to stay exactly that: lean and mean, be efficient, be very targeted, and, try to avoid getting out of control with the overhead and maybe, tons of systems that you maybe don't need, or they're not really pushing the needle. So why don't we just kind of dive in? What does your team right now look like? Well, we'll wrap around, again, kind of starting from the beginning for those that are new, but right now, what kind of systems, procedures, team members, all that, what does that look like in your wholesaling business?
So for the most part, it's me, my wife, and a virtual team in the Philippines. I do have one VA in Pakistan that just does like SMS. We use Podio. We have systems and processes in place. Our virtual team is, kind of like a manager that manages. It's almost like a personal assistant / executive assistant that does a lot of operational stuff for me. Then an acquisitions person, follow-up specialists, and a couple lead managers. But that's pretty much the team at this point.
Gotcha. Okay. So interestingly enough, I brought on a team member in Pakistan who speaks excellent English. She's part of my cold calling, part. I don't do too much of the SMS stuff, but that's definitely an avenue to consider. Me personally, I got a little turned off by those that, as I'm sure you're probably aware, there's actual people that are just waiting for these texts to come in so that they can go ahead and sue you.
Oh, already happened. I already got sued.
You did? Okay. So, okay, got it. So while we're on the topic, why don't you
you are preaching to the choir.
Right. So the challenge is this: is that when you're putting out these texts,
but that same thing could happen with cold call.
Really? Oh, you're right. They're on the DNC list.
Yeah, like a system is whether you're using a cold calling software or like an SMS, like the system should be suppressing these things.
Right.
But the fucked up part about the situation was I wasn't even trying to get in touch with this guy. It was a wrong number.
Wow. No kidding. So was he one of those litigators that are just waiting?
Oh yeah. I Googled the dude. Like, it's crazy. Like, it's crazy how many people he has gotten in the last few years.
You know what the interesting thing is we're reaching out to these homeowners to buy their house. We're not reaching out to sell. So
listen, I already made that argument and I would have won, right? Yeah. I already talked to an attorney. They're like, yeah, you're right. But you can either settle out of court with him or pay me X amount of dollars to win the argument.
Right.
And it was like, do I want to bite off my nose to spite my face? And like, I almost did it. I was like, fuck that. I was like, I don't care if it costs me more money. But then I was like, I said, let your pride and ego out of it, make a business decision. Like, why are you gonna spend more money and then time on top of that?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
settled out of court.
that's
Yeah,
wild, man.
it was like, I made the argument. It's funny because I like in my mind, I'm like, there's no way that this guy can win in a court of law. And then I talked to an attorney that specialized in it. He's like, yeah, you're right. He said, if you go to and argue it, like, you're right, but it's
Right.
going to cost you more money.
Exactly. Isn't that something? I actually just spoke about that recently in my first, encounter with a lawsuit. It was a different type of scenario. It was actually a subject to deal. And, when we put our blood, sweat, and tears into this business, when we feel that we're not doing something intentionally wrong, like
Yeah,
I give
no,
the
not at all.
analogy.
Like shit, like I always tell like, well, not me, but like, we communicate to sellers like, hey, if you don't want to sell, make that crystal clear to us. I don't want to spend my marketing dollars on someone that has no desire to sell. So
Yeah,
trust me, if you don't want to sell, I don't want to be, reaching out to you in any, form of
exactly. Exactly. So, yes. I mean, that's like the big challenge, right? Is like, we put everything into this business and when we feel that we're doing everything, ethical. And like I said, I give the analogy, hey, when you're speeding, you get pulled over by the cop, you're pissed that you got pulled over. But if you're honest with yourself, look, I broke the law, it is what it is. When you're kind of getting exploited or are getting exploited by certain people, you want to go ahead and say, F this, I want to, what's right is right in principle. But then you fall into the scenario, am I going to go down that rabbit hole? It's going to drag me through the mud. It's going to get my mind off,
Yeah,
what I'm
exactly.
focusing on. And it's tough, man. I had to swallow that pill as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, you take the route of, hey, it's a business decision. Let's move on. So we didn't scare off half our listeners. Don't worry. It's not, it's not too common.
The funny thing is, right, that I did like a clubhouse, like, I don't know, like, because this had happened when I got sued. I don't know, I'm bad with time, but it was in the last 12 months. Like, it was somewhere,
Right.
And a couple months prior to it happening, I was on a clubhouse thing, kind of similar to this. And like I was saying, they were like, oh, do you ever, worry about getting sued? I'm like, listen, I've been literally pulling data and cold calling since 2012.
Right.
So I was like, I said, if it happens, it's just the cost of doing business. It is what it is.
Right. And
60 days later, I must have willed that into existence.
wow. Now, what was it? $5,000, I'm guessing, probably, to have this guy walk away.
It was like 4,500, something like that.
Okay, a little less. So interesting, again, it's cost to do business, but those that are starting off, you're probably not gonna start off, downloading large lists and blasting people
Yeah.
out with the SMS. And a lot of these, depending on what platform you have, they do, to my knowledge, at least some of them try to scrub these prior, right? They try to scrub
Yeah.
the litigators list and stuff.
Yeah, 100%. Like, usually any platform, like, they should be doing it. And if they're not, regardless of it's cold calling, SMS, RVM, whatever, you need to make sure that you're doing that. That way you don't get sued.
Right. Gotcha. Well, yeah, I mean, it's again, cost of doing business. So I mean, that's one component, right? Let's kind of maybe just take a little deeper dive into what your, process and procedures and all that look like, right? You have your team members. What's working for you in this hot market, right? We've heard about ringless voicemail, SMS, direct mail, cold calling, driving for dollars, you name it. What's working for you, what's not working for you, I personally, I could say, when I first got into this business, absentee owner lists were, the main ones, and you do very well. Not to say we don't market to those, but I do what's, multiple levels of motivation. It's not just their absentee. They may be behind on taxes, also an inherited property.
It's two, three tiered, like, motivation, not just absentee and equity, like absentee equity vacant, absentee equity, tax delinquent.
Exactly. So, they're kind of saturated now and not, but what's working?
So, in the last couple of years, like, what I've been producing the most from, and what I've been focusing most on, is SMS, RVM, and like JV deals, with relationships. And I would say, I've literally been marketing in real estate and closing deals on a consistent basis since 2010. So I've done pretty much all forms of marketing. I started out like just only doing bandit signs. Then I just was kind of doing driving for dollars and cold calling. direct mail, and I did all forms of direct mail, postcards, yellow letters, professional letters. I've done radio advertising, marketing on, shopping carts in large grocery stores, like literally everything.
Right.
The 4 to 6 main channels, like which everyone is familiar with, direct mail, cold calling, SMS, they all work, right?
Mhm.
Like some people have more, channels are more effective for other, one person more than the other. The key is doing them consistently, and doing enough of them, right?
Sure.
Like those are the two biggest mistakes people make, right? Like you don't do enough of the marketing, right? Or you don't do the marketing consistently, right? Like I can remember when I was doing like, and this is a couple years ago, I was sending about like 30,000-40,000 mail pieces a month. And like it would literally, in a good area that was expensive, I'd have to send 4,000 or 5,000 mail pieces to get one deal. Right. So like people would say to me at that time, like, well, hey, I'm sending out like 1,000 letters, every month or every 60 days. I'm like, well, if you're sending out like 1,000 a month and it takes 5,000 to get one, and that's on average, you're going to have to send anywhere from 3,000 to 7,000 to get a deal.
Right.
So you thinking you're doing enough marketing to close a deal a week, a deal a month. Reality, you're not doing enough marketing to close a deal, a quarter or a deal every 6 months. So, you got to be making sure you're doing enough of the marketing. And then also, right, it's all about the averages, right? So it's like I could send, 1,000, if the average was 1,000, right? Sometimes you're going to send 1,000 and get 2 deals, but other times you're going to send 1,000 and you're going to get 0 deals, like it's not necessarily, you got to be consistent, like with the marketing. And over the course of time, if you're doing it effectively, the results will become consistent. That doesn't necessarily mean like they're always gonna, every single week, you're gonna generate the same amount of leads, same amount of contracts, because that's just not how marketing has went from my experience.
Right, exactly. And that's a point that I say a lot. You know what? I mean, even from time to time, I'll slip up a bit, but consistency is so key. What you do today is what's going to put money on the table a month, 2 months from now. So, what you have on the table now is from previous work that you've done. And interestingly enough, that you say as far as like the volume, again, for some of the listeners that maybe are just starting off, they may say, wow, 40 or 50, I don't have the budget to send that much. Well, for them, they're going to have to do more work on the front end. As we mentioned before, multiple levels of motivation. They're going to have to really filter the hell out of those to get the most highly motivated sellers, and then be able to, market to them, the lesser amount, but 100%.
Yeah. And to me, like something, right? Like when I first started, like I did not have money, right? So I had to use my time because I didn't have money until I got to a point where I had money so I can invest the money into marketing. But if you have like, if you don't have any money at all and you have just a cell phone and a computer, go on Craigslist, walk around an area and create a list of potentially vacant properties, knock on doors.
Exactly.
To me, it's like people, you can either, you can make make excuses or you can make it happen, but you can't do both. So like if you want it, like you will find what you're going to do it by any means necessary. But if you don't really want it, you're going to find every excuse in the book for you why you're not succeeding.
Absolutely. So, I mean, driving for dollars, I talk a lot about that lately. I mean, that's something that works in every market. A lot of people, are not necessarily willing to do that. And he actually, my mentor, sometimes he busts my chops, but the reality is it doesn't necessarily have to be you driving for dollars. You can hire somebody to do it. That's an excellent avenue. That, and obviously word of mouth, which obviously is not scalable per se, but when you're starting off, anyone and everyone should know what you do. One of the last deals that I did was one of the best wholesale deals that I've ever, 50 something thousand. So, that was my yearly pay at corporate world. And we did it in one deal. Granted, it took probably a year for it to commence, but that's a decent size wholesale.
Yeah, not only that, like when that shit happens, it's like, wow, right? Like now I can do this again. Like once you hit another level in terms of fees, like it's like, oh shit, now it's like, oh, this is what's actually something I can make happen
Awesome.
again. Yeah,
Absolutely.
like I swear to God, like I'm a very like big into like the law of attraction. And like when I first started, the first 5 years of my career, like I literally always made $5,000 per deal. And in
Right.
my mind, it was like that was almost what like how much I should make on a deal, right?
Yeah.
So like I wanted to get to $100,000 a month in revenue. So I was always like, all right, well, I got to get to 20 deals a month. And then, this is like literally going back to probably 2015, 2016, something like that. I remember having a conversation, oddly enough, with somebody in New Jersey. I wish I remember who it was because I don't, but I remember he lived in New Jersey. He's like, Frank, you don't have to do 20 deals a month to get to 100 grand. And he's like, you could do 20 deals and not make 100 grand. And it was like a light bulb. And then I started like focusing on becoming more efficient, more knowledgeable about like areas and zoning, right? So I literally went from 5,000 per deal for 5 years to going from 5 to 9 to 15 to now I'm averaging, 20 some thousand a deal,
Right.
where, I thought 20 some $1,000s a deal, 5, 6 years ago was like, holy shit. Like now it's like, I've made 90 some, 70 some, 60, 50, 80s, like, and it's
Yeah.
just like now it's just like I don't look at that like, oh my, like now it's like, all right, now that's possible. And how can I do that more? And that's
Exactly.
kind of why I'm transitioning, I guess, which would be a decent segue into commercial real estate, because I don't want to do more volume of transactions. I want to make more money and honestly do less volume of transactions. So am I what's the least path of resistance for me to accomplish that in commercial real estate?
Absolutely. That's a great point, right? Because like we were talking about this earlier about, getting these big teams. Some people got, half a dozen cold callers just ripping out thousands and thousands of calls a day. And hey, that's great if it works for you. They're concentrating on certain volume, which I'm a fan in some regard. But again, lean and mean, I prefer smaller focus, fatter deals and less, a volume per se.
Yeah,
I think,
like over because you just had like again, I've been there and done that. And to me, it's like different strokes for different folks, right? Like some people
absolutely.
like want to be in an office 40, 50, 60 hours a week and creating, a team culture, like all of that. And don't get me wrong, I do some of that, but like I'm, you know, I want to, I have a lifestyle that I like, and to me, I don't want to be in an office working all the time or like working a crazy amount of hours. Like I did that for like, I used to work 70, 80 hours a week for
Yeah.
like first 5, 6 years I got in the business. But that's not that's not what I'm looking to do at this point.
Right. Well, that's a perfect segue because you're mentioning, hey, specifying or targeting certain zones and areas and whatnot. So, I mean, picking the market. What's some people say, hey, start local in your own backyard, which I'm a fan of, right? If you got to go look at a property, especially if you're new, it's close by and whatnot, rather than hopping on a plane. On the flip side, some people that want to go straight virtual, hey, setting it up that way from the beginning it might be a better avenue for them. That way, the transition from like local to virtual, or other
Yeah, I
applications.
seriously, I don't think that there's a right or wrong answer there. It's like different strokes for different folks. Like to
Yeah,
me, like I always feel that I'm super fortunate to kind of grow up in Philadelphia, a big city, with like a huge, growth in like in the city and population and investments and all that in like the last 10 years. So like it was easy and natural for me to just kind of do business in my backyard. Now, if I lived in, East Bumblefuck, Indiana, where there was a population of like 700, like I would say that that's going to be pretty difficult for you to be successful, like closing deals and making a good amount of money in a very, very small market. Now, hey, I could be wrong. Like, I don't know, but to me, it's something that, it's really on a case by case individual basis. To me, there's not a right or wrong answer. Just kind of see what you like best and go from
right.
there.
Yeah, and now start. I guess maybe at the end and work your way back. Hey, do I intend on investing mostly in my backyard, or do I eventually want to branch out? It's two slightly different approaches, obviously. So for you personally, how are you now? Narrowing down and specifying those that you're looking to target. Right? You said you had certain types of areas and zones and certain requirements.
Yeah, so what I'm now doing in terms of the commercial space is just kind of targeting, storage facilities in particular, you know, even on in the local sense, you know, I'm targeting particular zonings, right? So like RM1 zoning in the city of Philadelphia, you know, by right, you can do multifamily, you know. So a lot of the times there'll be like a small house on a large lot. And for most people, that's a single family house. But based off of how big the dirt is in the zoning, you can actually make it that, you know, a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 unit apartment building.
Exactly.
So like just having the knowledge of pulling that data and, you know, knowing what to target, you know, can allow to bigger spreads. And then just also targeting higher price points, right? Like, you know, it's more difficult to make 10, 15, 20, 30, $40,000 when you're selling a house under $100,000, right? So it's like if you're, you know, at a higher price point, 2, 3, 4, $500,000, you know, it's a lot easier to make, you know, that $20,000 spread.
Exactly. So with the commercial aspect, are you looking to wholesale those properties, you know, or is that the next step? Like, hey, you're looking to acquire and then, you know, put up your own apartment buildings and whatnot.
It's a combination of both, honestly. Like what I've realized now is like the best thing that I'm good at is like sales and marketing. Like I'm not good at managing people. I'm not really good at managing processes. I'm not good at managing much of anything, to be honest.
We're related, man. I'll tell you, we got a lot of similarities. I'm with
But
you.
but the sales and marketing, man, like, you know, not for nothing, I feel like I'm great at it.
Yeah.
So like what I'm doing now is just like I'm actually you know, there's one project I already closed on that I have a, you know, small equity percentage in Philadelphia that I actually can get a little bit more if I raise capital. You know, but just wholesaling them, to answer your question, but being able to establish relationships with people that I'll be able to continuously wholesale these commercial assets to and be able to get like a little piece of the pie, you know, because if I can, you know, do 1 or 2 a month on, you know, 1, 5, 10, 15, $20 million deals,
For
you know,
sure.
and I'm getting, you know, a point, you know, 2.5, 5%, you know, that's going to add up over time, you know, and again, all I need to do is focus on getting deals, you know, getting deals and then, you know, building relationships with the right people that are good at the other aspects, you know, to make sure that the deal is going to go smoothly, you know, once it closes.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's everything, right? I mean, you can have the best CRM and the best systems and people and all that, but if you don't have leads coming in, everything else is meaningless. This is the
Exactly.
most important part.
Yeah, what I've realized now, like, and it's for years I've realized, but like I'm not in the real estate business. Like I have a sales and marketing company, and real estate is the product that you know, that we market and sell.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree 100%. And I've heard people say that before, like once they had that mental shift, everything changed for them. So that's awesome. So now let me ask you this, for your residential, are you just marketing and like shotgun blasting, you know, all of Philly, or is there other criteria that you have for those?
For in like, no, I don't eliminate any zip codes in the city of Philadelphia, but like, yes, just like you said, like, you know, I'll do absentee, equity, you know, tax delinquent, absentee, equity, you know, vacant. So like I'm making sure that I'm like, you know, there's 3 levels of motivation there, and not just like blindly going everywhere. But
Right.
like, and again, like, so like with SMS, because it is like a more inexpensive form of marketing, you can go like a little bit wider. Like where now I'm kind of getting back into direct mail, specifically with commercial, you know, and that like I'm going to kind of go deeper as opposed to wider.
Right. Okay. Appreciate that. So you're still getting, I mean, I know Philadelphia is a huge city, but even with those multiple levels of motivation, like, you know, we'll call it 3 tiers, you're still getting 30, 40,000 prospects to mail to, or to send text
No,
messages.
no, so direct mail, I have not sent direct mail in like 2 years now.
Okay.
I'm just kind of getting back into it, specifically commercial. Like I'm not going to do direct mail to residential. But
Okay.
yes, for the majority of last year, you know, I was sending, yeah, I don't even know, like 7 to 10,000 a day, you know, 20 some days a week. So
Wow.
yeah, a lot.
Is this through Lead Sherpa? Is that probably one of the,
No, so I was using a company that for 2 years, and they just literally like on December, you know, 27th of last year, sent out an email that, you know, December 31st, they were closing up shop.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I had tested a few different ones in the first couple months, or I should say the first month of this year. And then finally, like the one that I'm using now, like I'm having similar results as the one that I was using for the last couple of years.
Okay, awesome. And then do they technically, filter through the
No.
litigator list and also no issues since, right?
No.
All right, good. Very cool. So let's just go ahead. Let's, take maybe like me through the process. A lead comes in or response to
Yeah.
it.
So what we do is, right, like, we pull our data from different data sources. One of which is PropStream, like I get, like a lot of people do. All right. So
Right.
we pull the data from PropStream. We get the data skip traced, from a virtual assistant that we utilize. Once we have that information, we, dump it into the SMS and RBM platforms. And then we start deploying the marketing. We have one lead manager that's focused primarily just on sending the text messages, and one that's more focused on like responding, verbally, because one's in Pakistan, don't really get him on the phone. The other one is in the Philippines. He is more like on the phone. So the lead managers just kind of do some pre-qualifications, identifying that they do want to sell, getting some very basic information about the property, trying to get an asking price, and then pushing that to the sales team. Our acquisition manager will get them through our process. Once they do that, if and when they do that, he'll send it to me, so I can evaluate it. I'll evaluate it, say, hey, we can sell this for 100,000, make an initial offer of 65, and then he knows to create the biggest spread as possible. Once we kind of agree to terms, we send out an agreement of sale prior to looking at the property. We want to control and get the property under contract immediately. Once we do that, the only contingency we have is like a 7-day inspection contingency. And that's literally just a walkthrough. We're just really trying to verify the information that the seller provided us.
Exactly.
As long as it's accurate information, like we don't try to renegotiate. At that point in time, we decide, hey, we're going to move forward or we're not. If we move forward, we order title, and then we start the disposition, process, start marketing it to our buyers list online and whatnot. And then, once we find the buyer, get the assignment signed, and then, work on clearing the title, getting it to closing.
Right. That's pretty straightforward. Let me ask you this: your first touch, the person that's screening them and getting you to like basic information, when they pass it to your lead acquisitions, is it literally like it's ready to be evaluated, or the first touch caller is just kind of like warming
Yeah,
them
very
up?
basic. Like we don't want a lead manager asking too many questions, because then it takes the opportunity away from the salesperson to build a rapport, and that's who we want them building a rapport with, right? Like if you ask, right, like if you have a lead manager or that first touch person like asking too many questions and or getting too much information, it's just like, so now what's your salesperson going to ask, right? Like, are they going to ask them the same questions, or they're just going to, some stuff it's good to ask some questions and verify information, right? Because you start out verifying information and you get the seller in the habit of saying yes, right? It just kind of sets their mind state, which is in a positive way. But yeah, we don't want them, getting too much information.
That's interesting. And obviously there's no one size fits all. I know some cold callers will try on the first, screen the hell out of them. Hey, they're hot to trot. We want to gauge them, and then they'll push it over to the lead acquisition to close the deal. But I'm with you. Some, depending on how good your I guess your lead manager is, how well they speak English, believe it or not, when they sometimes hear the accent, that could turn off some homeowners that are local here. I've actually had sellers say, oh, the reason why we went with you, or, are entertaining this is because you didn't sound like everyone else that was out of the country and spam calling me and all that. So,
Yeah, no, I 1,000% like agree, that I feel like, all things being equal, a local person will be a more effective, but just kind of, for me personally, like I just have had horrible experiences like hiring local people. So this is just, again, there's no like one way to do anything, right? Like there's so many, there's literally many different ways to skin the cat. So whatever's working for you, don't necessarily just try to switch to something else because you hear it's like something's working for something is working for someone else, double down on like what's working for you.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, and a lot of this is not just being consistent, but also running your KPIs, your key performance indicators, to know what is working. And it's so interesting because I was doing direct mail for years and never ran KPIs till probably, I don't know, 4 years ago. And I was doing this since 2009 full time. And someone's like, what the hell? The reality was, when I was first starting off, you put out this postcard to absentee owners, you couldn't even keep up with the lead flow that came in unless someone was like, if they were like, hey, I got to sell now, like other people that were on the fence or called, like we couldn't even get back to them. We got to focus on those that were hot to trot, so to speak. Now things have changed. It's everyone that calls gets a call back unless they tell us, hey, don't ever call me or contact
Yeah.
me again.
Yeah.
We're consistently following up on them. It's a complete 180. But again, it's just a different type of market.
Well, but also I would say the biggest thing with that and is more so that like, right, like when I'm, again, speaking for myself, when I got started, like it wasn't like, oh, I want to grow this big ass business. Like I wanted to make $60,000 a year and work for myself. Right. So like, it's not like you go into this, like for me, where it's like, oh, I want to build a business, right? Like you start, I'm like just hustling, I'm grinding, I'm making money. And
Yeah.
then it's like, I actually, started like kind of talking to higher level people. And they're like, yo, you got a shaky ass foundation on this big ass house that you're building, and it was just kind of like, a mentor of mine, Mark Evans, like said to me, like one time, he said like, what would happen if you died tomorrow? Like,
Yeah.
would your business die along with it? Yeah. Well, then you don't have a business. You're a very highly paid employee. And that
Exactly.
was like a mindset shift where it's like, wow, like I got to make sure I'm like, have clearly defined roles with systems, processes, KPIs. And trust me, that shit, I'm like a true visionary. So I'm not great at all of that other stuff, but
Yeah.
I'm much better today and aware of it, compared to when I first,
Yeah. That's what I'll tell you.
5 years ago.
We think alike, and I feel like we're almost related. And coincidentally enough, yes, Mark Evans, huge influence in my life as well, part of the Dan family and whatnot. And that's when I had my first mastermind in 2016. That's when KPIs and all this stuff actually started, becoming aware of what the hell they are and what their purpose is. But it's huge. I mean, by seeing what worked, and not only just like follow your KPIs, it's constant testing, right? What worked in 2009 is obviously not working now. And what's working today is probably not going to be working, or as well a year from now. So it's always, tweaking a little bit.
You got to test, and you have to be willing to adjust. Like I literally, again, like I was sending direct mail for like 5 years was how I generated like 60-70% of like revenue.
Yeah.
And it got to a point I'm sending like, 40,000+ pretty much every month. And it's just like the cost per lead is going, the cost per lead, the cost per deal is like going up significantly, where it's like, it just wasn't, the ROI just like wasn't there. So I literally made a total shift in the beginning of 2020 and went like heavy into SMS. And, that's like definitely like has worked well for me. But like to me, especially though with the commercial real estate, I feel like the direct mail is going to be like what can allow me to be consistent like with that.
Yeah, I think direct mail is something that always works. I mean, interestingly enough, I'm seeing the least amount of response rates that I've seen in the past, decade plus. But I mean, that's expected. Again, it's a very hot
Yeah,
market.
and I'll say this because like so many people get caught up on response rate. Like shit, I would love to have a low response rate and just a good, the conversion. How many deals you're getting from it. Like, that is like the most important indicator, right? Like how many deals is the money getting? Like how many leads you're getting is relevant, right? You want to track that. But I would much rather, have 5 leads that I got to close, or 5 to 10 to get me a deal, as opposed to 20 to 40 to get me a deal. And I think that's kind of what it is with direct mail, right? Like you're going to get like more of a motivated seller, with direct mail, with PPC, compared to SMS or cold calling. Like the cost of the marketing, and the quality are like kind of inversely related, right? So it's like if you're spending the marketing that's really inexpensive, like you have to generate more leads to get a deal. So it's like, yeah, the response rate and all that's going to look really nice, but you got to talk to a lot more people and just talk to a lot more people to get a deal, compared to like PPC or direct mail, where like that might be like 5 to 10 or something like that to get a deal, compared to 20 to 40 with cold calling and SMS.
Absolutely. And you're definitely spot on with that, right? Like you could offer, a free something and get a ton of responses, and then you got to filter through all that BS. I used to spend like hours and hours like filtering on the front end, just so that we could have highly targeted people and not have to, overload my team with all garbage and whatnot. So it's kind of like a happy balance, right? Like as you're starting to scale and do some large numbers, you are going to have certain filtering processes so that you're not inundated, especially when you're kind of staying, lean and mean, so to speak. So you kind of answered, I guess, the next question I had, which was, your involvement. Are you 100% out? Are you involved? Seems that you're still involved in the operations. Not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I myself, I always seem to get roped into certain parts, but I do enjoy a lot of the aspects to it. But so when your part is really, you're the one running the comps and all that. And
yeah, I kind of like steer the ship. I'm not like constantly working in the business, a lot, but like I'm kind of, the manager that I have, the overseas, her name is Maria, but I'm telling her what data to pull, where to pull it, but she's pulling it, sending it to get skip traced. I'm kind of was testing the different platforms and steering the ship, and like you said, the evaluation of it, we'll have to kind of hop on the call with sellers from time to time. My wife handles most of the disposition process, so I will help her with that when needed. But yeah, like I don't work a crazy amount of hours.
Yeah, no, like, listen, there's nothing wrong with it. Like I said, there's certain parts of the business that I like. I like the building and the growing and all that. And similar to you, man, I'll tell you, I feel like we're related. I'm not the best manager. Like I literally had
Me saying that I'm not the best manager, that's disrespectful to not the best manager. Like I'm a horrible
but like I had again, going back to 2016, first mastermind I attended, one of the books by Gino Wickman was Traction, and that basically says the right people in the right seats, and you really have to have like good documentation, all that. I started all that, and I'll be honest with you, I kind of was tested for the first time in years with the cold caller that I just brought on. I was like, I have all these documents sitting there, like, hey, the reality is I want to run a McDonald's operation. I want to simplify everything. And if someone's going to get onboarded here, I don't really want the involvement. I mean, anytime that there was training involved, that was always me. And okay, I'll just do it this one time again. So you hop on a call like this, you explain, and then guess what? You're doing it a year later and you're like, why am I still doing this? So I really made it my business to like, hey, I'm finding myself getting pulled back in, record this, document this, archive it, boom. And they're living documents. They'll change as your processes change, but at least we have the foundation of what this should be.
Yeah, spot on. Cause like same, like that's like been horrible. Like, but I did start investing a lot more in my team, like fourth quarter of last year than I probably personally invested, like in a long time.
Oh yeah.
But I was doing weekly trainings with the sales team and, the lead managers, and recording them. And, even now, like I'm constantly looking at my Podio and kind of saying, hey, like, is there any issue with a particular lead, and then kind of going over it in real time. And then my team is on call rail, so any calls that we ever have are recorded on call rail.
Yeah, that's key. And that's kind of what I'm doing as well, is like listening to the calls and then either providing like commentary, and then I'm going to try to take the best calls and just kind of keep them as like a library for these guys to listen to. But that's something that's new for me, because we never really did the cold calling aspect. That was always the leads coming in and following up and whatnot. But if you have the right sales team and people that can close deals, it's definitely an avenue to consider. And especially those that again, that are starting off, you're going to be doing, if you have limited budgets, you're not going to be spending a ton of money on direct mail. You're probably going to be doing, hey, cold calling, driving for dollars, word of mouth, so to speak. So actually, not to divert too much, but being that you're in the Philly market, and not too long ago, I saw videos from Jamel Gibbs and stuff like that saying, wholesaling illegal. Long and short of it, I think they require a license now to wholesale properties in Philadelphia. Is
Yeah.
that accurate?
Yep, they do require a license.
Which is crazy. Well, it's probably a cash grab, but anyways, and that's not all of
That's literally like all it is. Like it
yeah.
doesn't like, you have to pay a fee, have insurance and like that. That's pretty much it. It's literally a cash grab. There's no oversight. Like it's just
So
insane to me.
this is just Philly specific, not all of the.
Philadelphia. Yep, just Philadelphia. It's like one of the only, I want to say there's like 4 or 5 cities in the US that like kind of has restrictions or licensing requirements, like Philly, Chicago, and I think a couple other ones. But yeah.
Yeah, so with that, so you have to have what, just general liability insurance, you just got to register and pay X dollars a year and that's it?
Yep, that's it. It's like
Amazing.
nothing crazy. It's literally again just
Cash, yeah, gotta love it. Okay, I just want to address that because again, some listeners might be in Philly and saying, oh, well, this is great where, works by you, but you're actually, doing business where they require that, but it hasn't been a showstopper. Just
at the end of the day, like if you go about your business the right way, which I like always have, like I have nothing to worry about. Like there's agents that I could report that do way more unethical shit than like, my, scumbag wholesaler self.
It's wild, man. I'll tell you. It is a service. Listen, not every wholesaler out there is great. Like we were talking before.
Yeah,
That
no, listen, like to me, like, there's not all great wholesalers, there's not all great agents, like there's not all great like cooks, like everything, whatever you want to like identify somebody as, like, yes, but like don't judge the 20% of the bad by the 80% of the good.
100%. I mean, and that's the reason why we continue to do the ReiUnite show. Besides giving back, it's the more educated people are out there, the better it is for the industry, right? I mean, I mentioned to you before, like I've gotten my own deals sent to me, and
Yeah.
listen, I appreciate them taking action. The thing about, I guess, wholesaling real estate is the low barrier of entry, right? You really don't need good credit. You really don't need technically any money, right? I mean, it takes
With
gas.
something like that, to me, like that's a no. And I've never ever done that in my career. Like ever, even when I like, ever, like that's illegal.
Yes.
Right? Like,
So
you cannot market a property that you don't have under contract.
yeah,
But
so I'll give him an olive branch. Back in the day, early on with the flex options, and you probably remember this as well. I mean, go back to 2008, 2009. There was like daisy change with wholesale deals, 3, 4 wholesalers involved in it. And listen, maybe they were starting off, got a deal, had a quick flex option, and then sent it to me because they knew I was buying, whatever it may be. At the end of the day, it's not good for the industry, and so that way, by us educating.
transparent, really, like, it's like, hey, like listen, there's been plenty of times like where it's like I'm not gonna like, I've marketed other people's property, but it's like, hey, you're gonna sign an addendum to the agreement that you signed so I can legally market the property for the most part. If I don't do that, then yeah, I might call a few people that I know if someone asks me to help them move their property, and I'm gonna preface it, yo, I have a deal. It's a buddy of mine, a friend of mine, like, wants me to help him sell it. I don't personally have it under contract, right? Like I'm going to be
Exactly.
transparent about that. Like I'm not going to say, well, hey, I got this deal under contract. Like,
Yep.
To me, the biggest thing is just kind of just be transparent.
100%. I mean, and that's kind of the challenge, right? Like there's a lot of information out there, and again, I applaud them for taking action. But there is something to be said. I'm a fan of ready, fire, aim, but you do have to have some kind of foundation. And some people that don't know enough, it can be bad for the industry. And then you have regulators that are pushing to get licensing and all that, and who knows where that stuff ends. But at the end of the day, I think it's good to educate them, not only just so that it's good for the industry, but also, hey, listen, if someone's properly trained and they're bringing you a deal or me a deal, hey, they did their proper legwork. They've actually done the homework and hey, this is a legit deal, instead of, hey, this person's off Craigslist looking to sell, and they didn't vet them and whatever, and they shoot it over hoping to make that quick 5,000. It's just kind of messy. So, I think it's good, obviously, being able to share, from experienced guys, and to have a good influence on them. So with that being said, before we wrap up, I guess, any words of advice or suggestions to, for those wholesalers and they're starting out, whatever it may be, to really, ensure or help ensure their success?
To me, the business is simple, right? Like it's not rocket science. It's not these concepts that are, hard to understand, but it's not easy, right? Like you're going to get kicked in the teeth. You're going to, you're going to want to give up. It's going to be a roller coaster where you feel you figured everything out and you made all this money, and then, you go 2-3 months without a check.
Yeah.
Everyone that is successful experiences all of that stuff, and probably much, much more than you'll ever understand. The one difference between the people that succeed and the people that don't, they quit.
100%.
You
100%.
Like it took me, again, like I knew nothing about nothing, and I was like poor growing up. So I had a poor person's mindset. I didn't ask people for help when I got into the business. Like it was like, oh, I'm going to figure this out on my own. So like it took me a few months to close a deal, but from the time I started in January of 2010 to the time I got to a point where I was closing like a deal a month, which is only bringing in $5,000 a month, and it cost me money to get that. Like
Sure.
that was 18 months. Do you know how many people in that 18-month period that I talked to that just got started when I did? And do you know how many people are still here?
Probably not much. Probably
Yeah,
10%.
there's literally a couple people that I can remember that when I got started in Philly in 2010 that are still around.
Yeah.
Like maybe like a handful of people.
I'm with you, man. I mean, and listen, it's, a lot of times we talk about the successes, which is great, it's motivational, all that. But there's a lot of the challenges that go untold, man. I mean, I've actually spoken about them a couple times, things that take a lot of the wind out of your sail. And truth be told, man, I think a lot about that lately. Like we all have the same thoughts. We all encounter the hardship and go, fuck this, I want to quit, whatever. But powering through, like, I don't know, something within me, even if I have that, I can't, it's not in my nature.
I don't have it in me, you either,
Exactly.
like it's not about eliminating like those thoughts or like not having those fears, just not like fucking succumbing to those fears. And
exactly,
it's like, it's like, and then it's like, it's kind of like, you also have to put stuff in perspective, right? Like it's like, I'm definitely like not where I kind of quote unquote like want to be, right? Like I'm content with where I am. I want to continue to grow.
sure.
But when I look back to see like where I started at and where I'm at today, it's like, I never in my life, thought I could make 100,000+ a year, and I've been doing that for like pretty long,
Yeah,
a pretty long time now.
it's so funny you say that, right? Because you set these goals, and it's like when you're putting in the hard work and the daily reps, and when you finally get to them, it's not like, oh my God, it's like you're expecting that, and then by the time you're there, you already have your sights set at a higher goal. I mean, because it's not about.
There's a like listen to this if you never heard it. There's like a speech by Matthew McConaughey. I think he won like an Oscar or something, right? But what he said to me was like just great, which is like, I'm always chasing, the version of me that's 5 years older.
Yep.
Right, because you're never going to catch that person.
Yeah.
But if you keep on chasing that person, like you're going to continue to grow, improve, and get better, and just like live a good life. But like to me, that just is like spot on. Like I'm literally just kind of chasing. I'll be 40 next year, so I'm chasing the 50-year-old version of me.
Yeah, no, and it's funny, and I don't like that to be misconstrued. Sometimes my wife may think like, oh, you're not happy with where you are. I'm like, do not misunderstand. I am extremely happy with where I'm at. It's just kind of how Grant Cardone says, like, hey, if I've gotten, like, when I first started real estate, I wanted to make 52,000 a year. That's what I was making at corporate world, only just to be able to pursue what I want, what I had a passion for, not to be making tons of time, literally just to have that opportunity. That was where my mindset was. So as Grant Cardone says,
what you just said, that's where your mindset was. And then you realize, damn, if I would have thought bigger, I would have got bigger.
Exactly. So it's kind of like how Grant Cardone says, like, what am I really capable of? So when you get to that point, if I'm capable and I was able to do this, what can I do for the short time that I have here on earth? So it's inspiring, and it's not really just business related. I talk a lot about this stuff. I feel like, for example, and although I missed this morning, my son was up all night, but long and short of it, me changing my morning routine by going to the gym earlier instead of, at night was a game changer for me the past 2 years. It just set the pace. So like, just all around, like, how do I better myself physically, spiritually, business? It all is interrelated. And I just feel like when you get on that that winning and that progress, like to me, I need daily progress to feel right, you know, if I,
Yeah, like to me, if I'm not growing, like I feel bad internally.
yeah, get
Like
100%.
if I'm like stagnant, like, and I felt
Yeah,
this way, like where it's like, damn, like why, like what's wrong with me? Like everything seems to be good, but it's just like I don't feel like I'm getting better.
100%. And I found out the reason why we feel that way, or at least I do, is that because you know you see people around you doing it, you know you're capable of it. And unfortunately, by having that stagnation, it drives you nuts because you know what's possible. So
Exactly.
awesome, man. Well, hey, listen, I really appreciate it. I know actually, wow, we're almost at an hour. Awesome info. I do appreciate you having me on. For our listeners or whatnot, how can they get a hold of you if they had, want to follow up any potential deals or whatever it may be?
Yeah, you can hit me up on Facebook, Frank McGovern. My Instagram is Frank Buys Philly 215, and you can also email me at frankbuys Philly.com.
Awesome, man. Hey, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to having you on in the future. We'll take even more deeper dive. And yeah, man, enjoy the rest of your day. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. It was a pleasure. Have a good